So what week is this, Carol?
So this podcast episode, which we are recording on May the 1st, is actually coming out on May 10th, which is just in time for Mother's Day, which is as late as ever is because Monday is May 1st.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Because it's always the second Sunday of the month.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's always the second Sunday of the month, but I guess it would be the latest one. So that means
around here, everybody takes their mamas out to the garden centers to buy a hanging basket. You can do better than that, people.
I used to plant my mother's pots every year. I would go over there, and when she was in better shape, I would take her with me. But then as things, she got older and things were more broken, I would just go buy the plants and I'd help her pot them up. And I have the best picture of my mother with a plant, and she's got the biggest smile. That's a nice memory. Thanks, Carol.
That is a nice memory. Anyway, the garden centers are very pretty here. Why don't you get started with this episode?
Welcome to the Garden Angelists, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on 7.5 acres out in the country. I garden about 1.5 acres of it.
I'm glad you clarified. I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about 1/3 of an acre.
We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want you to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Hello, Dee.
Hello, Carol. How does your garden grow?
Well, this is coming out May 10th. So I believe that I will have seedlings outside hardening off. I will have annuals probably piling up on the patio, but I will be reluctant to pull out my violas, who are having a very lovely spring after somewhat of a rough start with temperatures in the teens and then temperatures in the 80s. But these last several weeks of this cool temperature, anyway, they should be doing quite well. And by the time this records, I will have been to the Johnson County Garden Fair, which is always a highlight of spring. More on that later.
You want to know about my garden?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to make a guess because it's May 1st. My violas have also had probably their best spring ever. And we had the same situation. It was really cold in Oklahoma, and then it was really hot, and that's when the fires happened. And then it got really cold again, and then we got rain. And so the violas are like, hello, we are so happy. And I have to say, growing them from seed made really healthy plants that withstood all of this fluctuation. So that's something for me to realize for next year. And out of the group of blues that I grew, I will have certain favorites.
Very nice. So we can talk about those next spring.
Also, I grew blue, and it's May. And traditionally in Catholicism, May is Mary's month. It's when we have May crowning, where the little kids crown Mary for May.
Right.
And also blue, blue is Mary's color because she's Jesus's mother, and he wears purple. Or red. So anyway, it's just an interesting little side tidbit. I have a lot of blue violas, and they make me really happy.
Very nice. Well, I'm going to go ahead and do a quote. And you sent me this quote not less than an hour ago. And I thought, oh, that's a good one, better than what we had.
It was a good one, wasn't it? Yeah.
'Tis May, the elfish maiden, the daughter of the spring, upon whose birthday morning the birds delight to sing. They would not sing one note for you if you should so command, although you are a princess of the land. And that is the last part of a poem called A May Day Madrigal by Robert Fuller Murray. He's a 19th century poet. He was born in the United States in Massachusetts, but his parents got a divorce, which is very unusual in the 19th century.
Yeah.
And his father raised him in England and Scotland until he died.
Huh. I wonder what kind of accent he had.
I'm going to guess he had a British accent because I think he was about 6 when he got taken from the United States to England.
Very interesting. And then, of course, the Scottish accent's totally different. I can't even understand what they're saying. I have to do subtitles. If I watch a Scottish show on Box, I'm like, I have no earthly idea what they're saying. Okay, so we're going to talk about society garlic. And I brought this up, but you did the hard part, which research it. And
well, wait a minute. Here's my research. Why have I not heard of society garlic?
Well, I know why.
It's a perennial that grows in zones 7 to 10, and I'm in 6.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about all I know, other than it's low maintenance, heat and drought tolerant, and adds interest in your garden, which I just basically copied and pasted from somebody's, hey, I want to sell you some society garlic page. So you need to tell us more about it.
Okay, I've grown it a couple of times. It's not my favorite plant, but the reason I thought we should talk about it is because deer won't eat it. They will not eat it. So if you have an area in your garden that gets really bad deer pressure, society garlic's a good thing to plant there. Number one, you probably won't have to water it, and deer won't eat it. And deer can be a real problem in the garden. And the other thing is that I think it doesn't smell very good. In fact, I think it smells like skunk if you get up really close to the blooms.
Really?
But you're not going to get up close to them. I need to look that up just to be sure. You talk a little bit about how you wish you could grow society garlic.
Well, I'm not sure I want to grow a plant that looks like smells like skunk.
They say a strong garlic odor.
Yeah, I would say that. I would say yes to that.
But then over here, it says the purple flower actually has a sweet smell, but the bulbs and leaves have a pungent odor that is stronger than that of the flower. I really think it smells a little skunky, but that's just me. Our wonderful listeners who listen to this and then offer us their information, I haven't grown it in a while, so somebody who grows society garlic can tell us. Anyway, it's a deer-resistant plant. It's really good to put at the edges of the garden where you don't want deer pressure. So
now, I will tell you that there is a yellow flowered garlic called Allium flavum.
Yes, I know that one too.
And it's a bulb. It's hardy to zone 10. I mean, 4 to 10.
4 to 10.
And it's one that comes up and it flowers and then it just sort of disappears. But I do have that. And that's actually pretty.
Mm-hmm. This one blooms purple.
As far as purple, I think that society...
the little short alliums, the millenniums, and the other one.
Oh, yeah.
Those are great. And they're also almost they're extremely deer resistant, almost deer proof. Mine are at the very front of my beds that face the street. And also I can tell you that they can go through a fire and come through it pretty good too. The tips of their leaves burned, the ones that were up, but they're up and they're going to bloom this year. So there you go.
Yeah, interesting. Now I gave you an allium that's called a garlic. Society garlic is not an allium.
It's not. Mm-mm.
It's Tolbagia violaceae. And so right away, I would want to grow it. For what reason, Dee?
Oh, heck, I don't know. Is it part of the Viola clan?
No, it's not. But it has violaceae in the species name. So it's Tolbagia violaceae.
Okay, but that doesn't have anything to do with violas, really.
I know, but because of my obsession with violas, I would see that. It's like when I grew the sweet corn called wild violet, simply because of the name. So I would want to grow it. So I wonder if there's a way to get a society garlic to grow in my garden, even though it's only hardy to zone 7.
Well, you could put it in a pot and bring it inside, but it's not worth doing that for.
It's not.
No.
Okay.
It's not.
All right. So we
that's it on society garlic. There's not much else to say.
Do you have a picture of it growing in your garden, or do you not grow it right now?
I don't grow it right now. I have a friend who grows it, and she has a lot of it. And it's just, no, I don't grow it.
Does it spread?
Yes, it does.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
not growing it.
If it spreads in an area that doesn't get a lot of water. Does that make sense? Like if you overwater it, I don't think it spreads as well. But nobody quote me on that, because I'll be honest, I haven't grown it in years because I don't like it that much. But
we thought we should mention it.
Well, because it's a really good plant because it's extremely deer resistant.
Deer resistant, drought tolerant, zone 7 to 10. Carol's not growing it. Now you can do the next quote.
Okay. There's not as nice as the smell of good, clean earth, except the smell of fresh growing things when the rain falls on them. And I know that has to be the main character in The Secret Garden. And that's by Francis Hodgson Burnett, who we love. And I cannot remember that guy's name, but it's the boy who takes her into the secret garden and teaches her about how things grow.
Right. Because this quote, if we were to write it out and say it the way it's written, we would be dropping vowels and consonants all over the place.
And I'm not going to do that. All right.
You're not going to do a dramatic theatrical reading?
You know, I'm the least theatrical person, you know. So vegetables, we're going to talk about stone fruit trees, peaches, plums, apricots. And it says Carol grows none of these.
How many of these do you have in your garden?
Well, I grew these for a long, long time, and I have wild plums out here, which are also called Mexican plums. And they grow all over this part of Oklahoma. So I always have plums. And they're also called sand plums. And that's what everybody makes sand plum jelly out of. And I should send you a jar of sand plum jelly, Carol. It is delicious.
These stone fruits, and you called them soft fruits because they are soft. The thing I would say about peaches, apricots, cherries, plums is, and we'll link to a very nice article from the University of Minnesota, because you can grow these pretty far north, but make sure you've found a good variety that grows in your climate.
I think that's true of everything, and especially true of fruit trees, because, I get asked about fruit trees a lot when I garden coach, especially people who want to homestead out in the country. And I've done it all. I have apple trees. Yeah. And I had peach trees until recently. And I cut down my last peach tree last year. And I have one simple word for you: borers.
Borers. Yeah, they get in there. And yes.
That's for peach trees and apricot trees.
But here's the other problem.
Can I say another thing about apricot trees real quick, and then you can say your problem?
You can.
So apricot trees bloom really early in spring. And so they almost always get hit by frost here. I don't suggest people grow apricots. Peaches, there's a town that is south of here called Stroud. And in Stroud, they have a peach festival. And you can get fabulous peaches there. Unfortunately, where I live in Oklahoma, even though I planted them up on a hill in a raised area, which you're supposed to do to stop frost pockets, I almost always lost my peach crop. And it was because of a late freeze. And so if you're going to grow peach trees, grow them for the flowers and grow them for the pollinators, because they are a very early pollinator supply of nectar and pollen, but they don't always make peaches in our part of the country. All right, now. That
is true. I was going to say the exact same thing. This is where choosing the right variety for your climate makes a big difference, because if where I'm at, and even up into Minnesota, you want a fruit tree that flowers as late as possible, because those early frosts, they can just kill your crop, so to speak, and you won't get good pollination if you get a frost at the wrong time. And I've seen that happen around here and I think we probably had a couple of frosts a few weeks back that might have affected some of the fruit crops.
Right.
So, but the other thing I would say is be growing them for flowers, and fruit is, what a nice
secondary.
Yes. What a nice thing. The other thing to think about is apple trees, for example. We know you have to have two varieties to pollinate.
Yeah.
And so on these, some of them, they will self-pollinate, but some of them, depending on the varieties, do like to have another one around to pollinate. So you got to kind of check that.
Okay. So, and my advice, which I wrote in my book, was that they are self-fertile, but they always do better if you have two. I mean, that's what most of the scientific literature says. And I had two for years, and I did get peaches unless we had a late freeze. Then when one of them died from borers because I didn't want to spray, and the spray schedule is so complicated that I always tell new gardeners, do the rest of your garden first and then work on your stone fruits. if you're going to be a homesteader, because there's a special spray schedule. And that's even if you're using something like Bordeaux mix and neem oil. Neem oil is considered a natural pesticide. Bordeaux mix is a natural fungicide, but it's very specific, and you have to be very careful because you also don't want to kill your pollinators by smothering them with neem oil.
Right.
Right.
Oh, yeah. It's complicated.
It's really complicated. So you know what I do for peaches?
Do you go buy them?
I order them from a guy in Georgia called Peach Truck, and I ship them. And actually, he comes to Oklahoma, and you can buy a whole case of peaches from him because Amy did last year.
We have people that bring up peaches from Georgia, and we had a truck. I guess it was a couple of months ago. There was a bunch of people standing in line in a parking lot, and I'm thinking, what are those people doing standing in line? There was nothing there. Well, then when I came out of the store, it was a citrus fruit. It was grapefruit and oranges and stuff that they had trucked up from Florida. And
I'm glad they've started doing this more because honestly, there's nothing like a peach that ripened on the tree. I've even ordered for Bill a box of his peaches, which are really expensive. But, it's for his birthday and he loves peaches, and they come and they're like huge.
Yes.
And then, it's a beautiful, unblemished box of peaches. And I think there's 12, and it's just perfect for he and I. And happy birthday. Because what do you buy the man who has everything?
A box of peaches.
That's right. So if you want to grow them, yes, go to a really good source like Stark Brothers that will tell you about bloom times so that your trees bloom at the right time. And that's true with apple trees too. And also, if you live in Oklahoma, just a side note, apples are really complicated. And that's because of the eastern red cedar, Juniperus virginiana.
Oh,
that tree causes cedar apple rust. And right now, my Facebook message is just full of pictures of cedar apple rust. People going, what is wrong with my cedar tree? Well, your cedar tree is a juniper, and it gets cedar apple rust. And then those spores hit the apple trees and they can disease them. So I don't even grow apples. They're just too hard.
Well, if you don't want to do a bunch of spraying and stuff, you can grow these fruit trees, but don't get too excited about a perfect harvest of, 12 lovely peaches. You have to be willing to accept some imperfections if you're not going to use any sprays.
Don't you think that's a good piece of advice for gardeners, period?
Yeah.
Accept some imperfections.
Exactly.
Because I don't spray stuff. I haven't done that for years. Only in the greenhouse, and I use neem oil. And you can only use neem oil until it's 80 degrees outside. So this week, which by the time it's May 10th, it will be really hot. You'll be through using neem oil.
Yes. Always follow the instructions on the package to the letter. Don't.
Yeah, because you don't want to burn your plants.
That's right.
Okay. Next quote.
Next quote is, every spring is the only spring, a perpetual astonishment. And that is by Ellis Peters, who really is Edith Mary Pargenter. I don't know how to say.
I don't know if it's Pargeter or Pargeter. I don't know. She wrote the Brother Cadfael mysteries, which I loved her books, and I also loved the show.
I don't think I watched the show a bunch, but Brother Cadfael was a 12th century monk and herbalist in her books. I have all of them.
Which was so much fun.
Right back there on my shelf. I have every one of them.
So Derek Jacobi played Brother Cadfael in the show, and he was so good. And they're just such fun shows. I watched one the other day just for fun. They're on BritBox.
Okay, I'm going to watch some on BritBox just for fun.
They're really old fashioned, but they're still fun. And you know what? They're clean. Clean is good.
Clean is good. So on the bookshelf is The Allergy Fighting Garden, Stop Asthma and Allergies with Smart Landscaping by Thomas Leo Ogren. And we're going to put an Amazon link because I think this book from 2017 is out of print. I think.
It might be.
Anyway, at first, so I was looking at the description of this book, and I'm holding a library book copy because one of those days I was at the library and you texted me and I said, "Oh, I'm at the library." And then you said, "Get this book." So I'm like,
yeah,
I do whatever D tells me. I got the book.
That is so not true.
And it says, if you're one of the millions of people with allergies or asthma, this totally unique book shows you how to avoid plants that trigger allergies and to create a garden that will actually protect you by trapping pollen and cleaning the air around you. And so at first I thought, oh, and then the next part of the description, it says, it's a matter of choosing more female flowering plants than male flowering plants. And I thought,
because they catch the pollen. That's they think that's one of the reasons we have so much trouble with allergies now, is that they produced so many plants that were male, because people don't want fruit. They don't want berries and stuff. And so the industry worked really hard to create more male plants. And unfortunately, that's caused a lot of pollen. So
yeah, it has caused a lot of problem. And the thing I would say is what's very useful about this book before I return it to the library is he has, and I would say 3/4 or more of the book are plant lists, alphabetical, where he ranks every plant on a scale of 1 to 10. And there's over 3,000 plants. So 10 being the worst for allergy sufferers and 1 being the best. And so if you truly do suffer from allergies, which can be quite debilitating, then this would be a good book to get and have as a reference to decide what you're going to plant in your garden. Now, the problem is when you live in suburbia, you kind of have to deal with your neighbor's plants as well. And I'm reminded of in Garden Club last June, we went to see this woman's fairly large garden where she's doing some cut flowers. And the neighbors, and even on one side of her backyard was what I would call a hedgerow, and the neighbors had the biggest cottonwood tree I've ever seen, and cottonwood trees make my nose go crazy.
Yeah, they're pretty rough. Even though they're a native, they're tough, especially if you have a bunch of male cottonwoods around. The females, but you see the puffs of air flying through. It's just about cottonwood season here.
Yeah, and it almost looks like it's snowing in some places when the cottonwood fluff is all over the place. Yep. So, but it is, it is allergy season. And if you suffer from allergies, this would be a good book to get.
It would be. The other thing I want to mention is that all of the allergy commercials, the ones for all of the antihistamines, always show somebody in a garden with a whole bunch of very bright flowers and then have them sneeze. That's not the reality of things. Big, bright flowers, anything that is floral, that is pollinated by insects is not your problem. The stuff that is wind pollinated is the problem. And so I always get mad at those commercials because I'm like, you're going to make people think gardening is a huge allergy deal. And it's not the gardening. It's all the other stuff around you, like ragweed in the fall.
I just turned at random. And so here's a 10, the almond tree, which neither one of us can grow. Severe allergies. It's a 10. People that live in close to almond orchards are most likely to develop allergy. It's terrible.
That's interesting because it is pollinated by honeybees. In fact, the almond crop is completely dependent upon pollination from honeybees that are shipped in by the truckloads. And I'm going to guess that the reason it's a problem with almond trees is because they don't plant anything underneath them to capture some of that pollen. So it's just a wasteland under the almond trees. And then they ship in the bees. The bees do all the pollination. They ship them on to the next thing. And it's not really very sustainable, and it's not very good for allergies either.
No, and I was just looking through this, and let's look up our favorite plants, of course. So I'm going to look up my favorite plant,
the viola.
Oh, how did you guess? And it's a number 1. So allergy sufferers can plant that. I knew that too. Then let's look up.
Which one are you looking up for me?
Well, I'm going to look up roses for you.
Oh, how sweet.
So for roses, it says, oh, that's kind of a cop-out. Variety by variety. It doesn't give a number.
Well, that makes sense because some roses are open petaled and have, their little face. And so they have the stamens that the bees and butterflies can get to. Other roses are all closed up. I'm going to guess they're not real high, though.
No, and he goes through and he starts talking about some individual ones. And so some of them are a 6, some of them 4, some of them 2. So they're all over the place.
Yeah, it just depends on the rose, I would assume.
So the result of this is The allergy sufferers should plant more violas and less roses.
No.
Anyway, that's the bookshelf. The Allergy Fighting Garden, Stop Asthma and Allergies with Smart Landscaping by Thomas Leo Ogren. And so if you have allergies, this would be an excellent reference to have. Amazon still has copies.
It would.
You probably can find used copies. And in a little bit, I will take this one back to the library, and then Indianapolis will have another copy in circulation.
Good deal. You want me to do the next
Yes,
quote?
please.
We are all dreaming of some magical rose garden over the horizon instead of enjoying the roses blooming outside our windows today. That's by Dale Carnegie, who put it in How to Win Friends and Influence People. We've talked about Dale before.
I always say Carnegie, and you say Carnegie.
I thought it was pronounced Carnegie, but I might be wrong. I don't know.
I say Carnegie.
Well, we should look it up because it doesn't matter.
But
that's not
he wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I do not believe that that constantly trying to correct somebody's pronunciation wins friends or influences people at all. I apologize.
That's okay. We're going to look him up and see how to pronounce it. I have no idea. So he was very, very famous when we were young.
Yes.
And we've talked
You
about
can still take Dale Carnegie courses.
You can?
Yes. In fact,
we discussed that. Yeah.
There was a time when I was a working gal, there was a time when it was popular to send new managers to this class, or maybe people they thought needed to sharpen up their people skills or something. I never went to one, but they did send a few people to Dale Carnegie or Carnegie classes.
Whatever his name is. Okay. So this is, and I remember this from the last time we did one of his quotes. We both said he was influential when we were children. He was already dead. And I just said it again, because his training and that book were super famous.
And
they were still famous in the 60s, right? But he was dead. He died in 1955. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Anyway, he became very rich from telling us all how to have friends and influence people. But we did this because he talked about the rose.
Exactly.
And the dirt this week is the American Garden Rose Selections. All right. So they come out every year, and they've come out with the 2023 winners. And I thought I'd tell people what the winners are. But what is important about the American Garden Rose Selections is these are actually selected sort of like All American Selections. They grow roses throughout the United States and see how they perform and go from there. And then they choose them. So it's not just, a company choosing their own rose and saying, wow, that's super awesome, you should buy my rose. It's much cooler than that. And this year's winners are, and I should also mention that the testing program wants roses that are easy to care for, disease resistant, suitable for different regions in the country. Okay. And you also get awards for fragrance, because they've now isolated the gene, which will also give you fragrance. I will say this. I don't think the fragrance is very complicated. It's all the ones I've had that are also in the disease resistant category seem to me to have a tea fragrance, but we would have to ask Teresa Byington just to make sure. And she has the Rose Chat podcast. Anyway, the one I'm most excited about is Brick House Pink. It won a regional choice award in 3 regions: North, Central, Northwest, and Southwest. I love the color of it. And it is a pretty simple bloom. I would say it's a double, and you can see the pollen in the stamens, and that's good for pollinators, as long as you don't use systemic rose insecticide on your roses, which some people do. I do not. Then there's Oh So Easy Urban Legend, Petite Knockout, which I actually tested, not for this, but I was sent plants. That was a good little rose for containers. Mine eventually, I took it inside the green. Well, I didn't. Someone else took it inside the greenhouse. And by the time I realized it had scale, so I had to get rid of it. But that wasn't the fault of the rose. And then there's Brenda Bella Pink Princess, which is introduced by Suntory. And it was also a winner in 3 regions. And then the one that was scented is called Magnolia Memories. And it was actually introduced by the Antique Rose Emporium.
Very nice.
For fragrance. So if you go to this link, which we're going to put into our show notes, you can see these roses and also decide if you want to order one. I did not order any of these. I'm still thinking about Brick House Pink, but as you know, I ordered 2 David Austin roses. And so I try not to order too many roses every year. I'm trying to be much more conscientious. Roses take up a lot of room.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Mm-hmm. But that's very interesting. I probably won't get any of those. As you know, I'm on the hunt for Rise Up Amberness, the proven winner's yellow short climbing rose. More on that later.
Yes, and it's a little bit hard to find. Okay, so that's our dirt for this week.
Well, you were also going to talk about the American Heritage Rose Foundation. Actually, it's just Heritage Rose Foundation.
Because it's not just American, it's international.
Heritage Rose.
The Heritage Rose Foundation is a group of rose aficionados. I joined this year. And they have really, really great materials on teaching you about historic roses. I tend to like roses that have a bit of history with them because I'm a history buff. And they're having their membership meeting in Shreveport this year, along with the ARS, which is the American Rose Society. But part of that, it's a big group of people, and they are trying really hard to maintain certain historic rose gardens. And they've also contributed roses to a brand new rose garden of historic roses that I think is in Louisiana. And it is just a pretty darn good group. They also identify old roses, which they were not able to identify Peggy Martin, which we talked about last week. So
right.
That's kind of cool too.
And actually, when this episode comes out, their show, which is Time for Roses, Come Home to America's Rose Garden in Shreveport, Louisiana, will have just concluded. It's May 5th through the 7th.
Okay, so
when this comes out on the 10th, that will be over, and we can probably look for interesting tidbits to come out from that.
And also, they're at that, so America's Rose Garden. That's part of the garden that they're putting together, that they're helping with, I should say, because there's a lot of people helping with it, and that's great because it has their section of it, if I remember right, is American roses that were bred in the United States before a certain time. So noisettes are part of those. Noisettes were created in the United States.
So I'm going to do a quote to take us into rabbit holes. A weed is but an unloved flower. Ella Wheeler Wilcox. I messed that up. Ella Wheeler Wilcox. She's an American poet, and she is famous for the line, "Laugh and the world laughs with you. Weep and you weep alone." Isn't that interesting?
Huh. I'm glad you started looking these up. That's fascinating. So tell me about your rabbit hole, because my rabbit hole has nothing to do with gardening.
Well, mine doesn't have much to do with gardening. So I was reading an interesting Substack. A guy wrote a fairly long piece about every year they lived in Houston, and his dad ran a secondhand bookstore. And every year, I think the beginning of June, they would pack up and head north to Chicago to go to this book sale that was held in a strip mall parking lot. And it was put on by an organization to raise money for a particular university. And I should have those details, but I don't. It's called A Pilgrimage for Book People. And he just made it sound so fun to have that annual trek that they made. And, they knew that no matter what, they were going to that book sale up there in Chicago in that strip mall shopping center. And it was very fascinating. It just got me thinking about the kinds of events that people used to have like that. And then they kind of go by the wayside because people age out and nobody takes it over. And that's kind of sad. But I'll relate it to gardening in this way. A, of course, it would be a great place to find old gardening books. But B, I was thinking about the Johnson County Garden Fair, which is May 6th. So it'll be over when we publish this podcast. But I hope those people don't really age out and that thing goes on, because it's always kind of like the beginning of the gardening years. Going to go down to that festival and check out stuff, see people, be seen. It's kind of fun. Anyway, that was my rabbit hole.
That's a good one. Are you going to say something about who's speaking or who will have spoken at the Johnson County?
Yes. Well, our friend Diane Blazik from All America Selection, she's the national director there, I think. Executive director,
I think
some
she
title.
is, yeah.
I saw that she is scheduled to speak, so I'm going to go down
She's a good
there and
speaker.
surprise her. I'll surprise
Oh,
her.
she'll love that. I really love her. She's a wonderful person. Okay, so my rabbit hole is I'm just working on trying to keep my dog in the yard. My dog, Francis, I'm sorry, I won't make this story long because it has nothing to do with gardening. He's a hound dog, and he's always liked to wander. But he's lonely now because our other dog passed away from, old age. And then we had the fire, and there are all these new people to meet in my neighborhood. Nice. He likes men. He likes men who feed him because he's very food oriented. And so they're putting in a giant gas line up at the front of the neighborhood. And then also everybody's getting their homes repaired. And so he has ended up wandering too far away. And so we're working on trying to figure out the best thing to do for him because we don't have the kind of yard that is fenced in like you would in the city. So it's been a challenge, but we're working on it. So what are your garden commissions?
So my garden commissions are, I'm going to clean up around the bird feeder, and the bird feeder underneath becomes just a huge mess. And so I was going to move it out into the lawn and make a big mess out in the lawn. Then I thought, no, I'm just going to leave it right where it is. But I bought these paving stones that sort of resemble flower petals in a way, because it's at Menards, which you don't have. Anyway, I bought 8 of them, kind of thinking I'd make like a circle around the bottom of the bird feeder so that at least it would be easier to clean up all the stuff. You could almost sweep it up.
Right.
So I'm going to do that. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to put it still in the same spot in this flower bed. It's also possible that I move it out to the yard. We'll see. And then, as I mentioned, I'm looking for that rose rise up amberness. I've got a couple more places to check. I was going to check yesterday at a place, and then with this huge thunderstorm just came up out of nowhere, like we're Oklahoma or something. And then even Teresa Byington, after I emailed her for yellow climbing roses, and I got some text.
Yeah, because I was like, I don't know of any good ones. And she's the woman to go to. She or Chris Van Cleve. Those are the people that you should talk to about what's the new thing in roses. They always know what's going on.
So she did text me a few times on, I think it was Thursday or Friday. She was out and about and texted me and showing me some that she found, but they're way too big. So I'm looking for that.
I think you're going to have to order it. I'm just saying. I had to order mine.
Well, before I order it, there's like 3 more places I want to check on the south side of Indianapolis. And if none of those 3 have it, then I will order it. And then also because we had several listeners comment about how they are successfully growing delphiniums.
You're going to try again.
I'm going to try again. I'm going to find some plants.
Okay, so there's more stuff written on the Garden Angelus Garden Club on Facebook. So you need to go look at that. He or she, and I don't know if that person is a male or a female because you can't tell from their name. But they showed pictures. Yes, with a hummingbird. And you know what else I found out?
What?
They don't have hummingbirds in Great Britain. So we got something they don't have.
Woohoo! Anyway, that's my commission. How about you?
So it's funny you mentioned the bird feeder and how much mess it makes. Well, my husband has 2 bird feeder. Well, no, 4 bird feeders on 2 poles that are on the edges of our deck. Well, my pots sit under there. And although we put up the bird feeders, all that seed fell in there. And so the first thing that happened is raccoons got in my pots and dug all the plants up twice. And so I replanted them all. And then the second thing that happened is then the seeds sprouted. So I'm now weeding pots. So the point of all this is I have got to move those pots up next to the house in the wintertime so I don't have to do this anymore because that is stupid. And I'm not doing it anymore. I've done it 2 years in a row and I'm like, duh, let's not do this anymore. So perfect potting mix. So I'm having to weed large pots. And that's it. That's just a thing for the future not to have to do anymore.
Yeah, well, I put trash bags over my pots on the back patio, so I would just take those trash bags off. And
well, then there's that, Carol. See, this is why I do the podcast with you, so that you come up with engineering type thoughts about what I should do that are super easy. So I don't have to move the pots.
Right. You just put a trash bag and then you kind of tuck the ends under the pot. And then in the spring, I usually have enough stuff that I want to put in trash bags and send out to the trash. I I just then use them for trash.
So I would use, these are big. These pots are big, so it'd be contractor bags, but same idea. And I usually do have to throw a few things away, although I try to put all my potting soil and stuff and old plants in my compost pile.
Yes.
All right, that's it. We got to wrap this up, girl.
Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you for listening to the Gardenangelist. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
If you listen to Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review that helps us get by others. Could you also share our podcast with your friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our websites.
And subscribe to our Substack newsletter, The Garden Angelist at substack.com, also linked to in our show notes.
And if you want to help support us, use those affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we're in a small commission and it costs you nothing. Or you can make a monthly subscription through Buzzsprout or a one-time donation through PayPal.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the Garden Gate. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.